The old two-lane highway stretched endlessly through the desolate landscape, cutting through the thick forest like a scar. The trees pressed in on either side, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky. The only source of light came from the headlights of the worn-out Chevy Suburban, which groaned with each mile. The digital clock on the dashboard read 2:13 a.m. Inside the car, the atmosphere was tense. Jake gripped the wheel tightly, his knuckles white. In the passenger seat, his girlfriend, Lisa, scrolled absent-mindedly through her phone, the glow casting eerie shadows across her face. In the back seat, their friends, Nate and Amber, slept fitfully, their heads lolling with the car's movement. They had been driving for hours, making their way from Colorado to Nevada for a weekend getaway. Somewhere along the way, they had taken a wrong turn, and the GPS had stopped working about an hour ago. No signs. No other cars. Just endless, suffocating darkness. Shouldn't we have seen a gas station or something by now? Lisa asked, glancing up from her phone. Jake exhaled sharply. I know. This road wasn't even on the map. Lisa leaned forward, peering out into the darkness ahead. Maybe we should turn around. We can't. I haven't seen a turnoff in miles. A soft murmur came from the back seat. Amber stirred and blinked blearily. Where are we? Lost, Jake muttered. Amber sat up, rubbing her eyes. Weird. I had the worst dream. There was this thing outside the car, watching us. Lisa shuddered. Okay, don't say stuff like that. This place is already creepy enough. Amber frowned and looked out the window. The trees blurred past, dark and motionless. Then, the headlights caught something ahead, a figure standing in the middle of the road. Jake stomped the brakes. The tires screeched, and the SUV skidded to a halt inches from the figure. A woman stood there, barefoot and wearing a tattered nightgown. Her skin was deathly pale, almost translucent under the headlights. Her hair hung in damp clumps over her face. Lisa sucked in a sharp breath. Oh my God. Is she hurt? Amber clamped a hand over her mouth. Jake, something's wrong. The woman didn't move. She just stood there, her arms hanging limply by her sides, her face hidden beneath the curtain of her hair. Jake honked the horn. The sound shattered the silence, echoing through the empty forest. The woman remained still. A creeping dread settled over them. We should go, Nate said from the back seat, suddenly wide awake. Now. Jake hesitated, his foot hovering over the gas. Then the woman moved. Not a normal movement. She jerked forward in an unnatural, spasmodic way, as though her limbs were being pulled by invisible strings. Her head snapped upward, revealing a face that was all wrong. Her mouth stretched too wide, her eyes dark pits. Lisa screamed. Jake slammed the gas pedal, swerving around the woman. The SUV fishtailed before lurching forward down the endless road. Lisa turned in her seat, looking out the back window. She's gone? Amber clutched her arm. No, she's not. Lisa turned back and felt her stomach drop. The woman was running after them. But it wasn't just running. She moved in bursts, her body twisting and contorting, like her limbs snapping into unnatural angles as she closed the distance between them. The speedometer climbed 50, 60, 70 miles per hour. But no matter how fast Jake drove, the woman kept up. Then she smiled, a horrifying, blood-chilling grin that stretched from ear to ear. Jake yanked the wheel, veering off the road. The car jolted violently as it crashed through thick underbrush before slamming to a stop. For a moment, everything was silent except for their heaving breaths. Is she still there? Lisa whispered. Nobody answered. Jake reached for his phone, hands trembling, no signal. Amber started sobbing softly. Then something knocked on Lisa's window. A slow, deliberate tap, tap, tap. Lisa turned her head and her scream died in her throat. The woman stood inches away, her face pressed against the glass. Her lips peeled back into a grin, revealing rows of jagged, yellowed teeth. Her skin was peeling away in places, exposing raw muscle beneath. Lisa fumbled for the lock, but before she could react, the woman's face split open. A deep, guttural howl erupted from her throat, and then she vanished into the darkness. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Jake whispered, "Drive, just drive." He turned the key. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. As he threw the SUV into reverse, Lisa caught something in the rearview mirror. Figures. Not just one. Dozens of them. Lining the tree line, barely visible in the shifting shadows. All of them standing still. All of them smiling. Jake floored it. The SUV rocketed forward, bouncing violently as it returned to the cracked pavement. The figures remained where they were, watching. They drove for miles, their nerves stretched to the breaking point. Finally, lights appeared in the distance. A gas station. Jake pulled in without hesitation, tires screeching. Inside, the fluorescent lights were painfully bright. The clerk behind the counter barely looked up. "Jesus, you kids look like you've seen a ghost," he muttered, chewing on a toothpick. Lisa leaned against the counter, gasping for breath. "We were on the road, and this woman..." The clerk's face darkened. "You took that road?" Lisa frowned. "What do you mean?" The clerk sighed, removing his toothpick. "People disappear on that road. They see things that ain't supposed to exist." Amber shivered. "But we made it out." The clerk gave her a long, unreadable look. "Did you?" Silence settled over them. Then the store's automatic door slid open with a ding, and a smiling figure stepped inside.
Story number 2.
The road stretched into the night, an endless ribbon of cracked asphalt cutting through the dense West Virginia woods. The only illumination came from the moon, pale and swollen, and the beams of the old Jeep Cherokee's headlights. Ethan drove with white-knuckled focus, his fingers tight around the steering wheel. Beside him, Ava rested her head against the window, half asleep. In the back, their friends Mark and Jess whispered to each other, their voices low, their nervous laughter betraying their unease. They'd left their last gas station an hour ago, following an old shortcut Mark swore would shave time off their drive home from their weekend camping trip. But the deeper they went, the more the road seemed to twist, and now it felt as if they were driving in circles. The GPS had died miles back, replaced by an ominous, no-signal message on all their phones. "We should have seen another highway by now," Ethan muttered, his voice tense. "Maybe we should turn back," Ava said, rubbing her arms as if cold. Mark let out a nervous chuckle. "Nah, man, we're fine. This road's just weird." Jess frowned. "What does that even mean?" Mark hesitated. "I dunno, just that my uncle used to talk about a road like this, said some roads don't lead anywhere. You just keep driving." A silence fell over the car. Then from the trees lining the road, something moved. Ethan caught it in his peripheral vision, a dark shape darting between the trees, keeping pace with the car, his stomach clenched. "Did you see that?" Ava sat up. "See what?" There was something hit the car. The Jeep lurched as if struck by something massive. Ethan fought to control the wheel as the vehicle skidded. He slammed the brakes, gravel spraying. They sat in stunned silence, their breaths loud in the still night. "What the hell was that?" Jess whispered. Mark turned in his seat. "Did we hit something?" Ethan shook his head. "Something hit us." The trees loomed, silent and watchful. The headlights stretched into the empty road ahead. There was nothing. Ava pulled out her phone. "No service," she whispered. Mark swallowed. "We should check the car, make sure it's still drivable." Ethan hesitated but nodded. "Fine. Quick." He and Mark stepped out, the night air thick and oppressive. The back of the Jeep bore a deep dent for that the metal warped, but there was no sign of what had hit them. The woods were still, too still. Then Jess screamed. Ethan spun toward the car. Ava and Jess were inside, staring in horror out the windshield. Something stood in the middle of the road. A figure, tall and thin, its arms too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its skin was stretched tight over its bones, and its eyes, black pits, gleamed in the headlights. It smiled. The grin was impossibly wide, splitting its face in two. Ethan felt his stomach drop. "Get in the car! Now!" Mark bolted for the passenger door as Ethan dived behind the wheel, slamming it into drive. The Jeep roared forward. The thing didn't move until they got too close. It lunged. A blur of motion. Thud! It slammed into the Jeep with inhuman force. The car shuddered. Tires skidded. Then, silence. The road was empty. Ava was sobbing. Jess clutched her arms. Mark turned, his face pale. Where the hell did it go? Ethan didn't answer. He just drove. Faster. The road twisted endlessly, the trees crowding in. And then the headlights flickered. The dashboard lights sputtered. The radio crackled to life, spewing static. Then a voice, low, garbled, whispering. "Turn around." Ethan's breath hitched. "Did you hear that?" No one answered, because they were staring at the rearview mirror. A face grinned back at them, not their reflection. It, a wide, gaping maw. Black, empty eyes inside the car. Ace screamed. The Jeep spun out of control, the trees blurred, the headlights blinked out, then impact. Ethan awoke to darkness. For a moment there was nothing but the sharp smell of gasoline and the distant ringing in his ears. His fingers dug into the steering wheel, then whimpering. Ava. He turned his head. She was beside him, her face streaked with blood. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's still here." His blood ran cold. Mark and Jess were gone. The passenger seat was empty. The back seat, empty. The door hung open, swaying in the night breeze. Something moved outside. Slow footsteps. Ethan turned his head, his heart hammering. A figure stood just beyond the shattered windshield. It grinned and mimicked his voice. "Ethan," it whispered. "It's still here." His breath hitched. Ava grabbed his arm. "We have to run." He nodded. The thing tilted its head as if amused. Then it moved. Too fast. Ethan yanked the door open. He and Ava ran. Branches whipped at their faces. The trees blurred past. The night stretched. The forest never ended. Then ahead, lights. A road. A real road. Ethan grabbed Ava's hand. "Come on." They stumbled onto the asphalt. An approaching car honked wildly, tires screeching. The bright headlights blinded them. Then impact. When Ethan opened his eyes, it was morning. He lay in the middle of the road, the warmth of the sun on his face. Beside him, Ava stirred, groaning. They were back, on a normal road, a highway, no endless woods, no twisted road. A truck had stopped nearby. A man in a baseball cap rushed over. "Jesus, kids, are you okay?" Ethan sat up, his body aching. He turned to Ava, his voice hoarse. We were lost, in the woods, something." The man frowned. "What woods?" Ethan blinked. Behind him, there was nothing. No trees, no road, no jeep, just an empty field. Ava trembled. "But we were just there." The man shook his head. "Ain't been a road back there for years. Used to be, but folks stopped using it after people started disappearing." Ethan's stomach turned. "What happened to them?" The man hesitated. Then, softly, "They never came back." Silence. Then laughter. Soft, faint, coming from the wind. Ethan's blood ran cold, because it sounded like Jess.
Story number 3.
The road stretched endlessly, a lonely black ribbon disappearing into the dense Alabama woods. The night was thick, the air heavy with humidity, clinging to the windows of the old sedan as it rumbled along the forgotten back road. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the occasional chirp of crickets from the looming trees. Brandon gripped the wheel, trying to ignore the gnawing unease in his stomach. The gas gauge hovered dangerously close to empty. Beside him, his girlfriend, Sophie, stared at the GPS on her phone, frustration clear on her face. "It's still not working," she muttered, shaking the device. No signal. From the back seat, Lucas scoffed. "Great, we're lost in Deliverance country." "Oh, shut up," Emily, his girlfriend, shot back. "Maybe if we hadn't taken your stupid shortcut." Lucas threw up his hands. "I swear, this road was on the map." Brandon clenched his jaw. He didn't care whose fault it was. They needed gas. And soon. A sign loomed ahead, half hidden by overgrown vines. The peeling paint read, "Murphy's Gas, 5 miles." Brandon exhaled in relief. "There, we'll stop, refuel, and figure out where the hell we are." The others didn't argue. As they drove deeper into the woods, an eerie feeling settled over them. The trees pressed in closer, their branches twisting unnaturally in the headlights. The air seemed thicker. Then something darted across the road. Brandon slammed the brakes, and the car skidded to a stop. For a moment, there was silence. Then Sophie whispered, "Did you see that?" Emily clutched Lucas's arm. It looked like a person. Brandon's hands tightened on the wheel. "We're in the middle of nowhere. No one should be out here." Ava swallowed. "What if they need help?" "Nope." Lucas shook his head. "That's how horror movies start." Brandon agreed. He wasn't about to go searching the woods for some shadowy figure. He pressed the gas, the car creeping forward. Murphy's Gas appeared at the bend, a small, decaying station with a single rusted pump. A flickering neon "Open" sign buzzed in the window of the tiny convenience store. Brandon pulled up beside the pump and shut off the engine. The silence that followed was unsettling. Lucas stretched. "I'll check inside, see if they got maps or something." "I'll come with you," Emily said quickly. Brandon got out to pump the gas, the night air thick and humid. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faintest scent of something. Rotting. Sophie stood close. "This place is creepy." The glass door to the store swung open with a hollow ding. Lucas and Emily stepped inside. A single old man sat behind the counter, motionless. His eyes were cloudy, skin sagging like an old doll. A battered radio crackled on the counter, whispering static. Lucas cleared his throat. Hey, we're kind of lost. Do you guys have a..." The old man's head snapped up. Lucas froze. The man's pupils were milky white. His lips stretched into a grin too wide for his face. His teeth, jagged and yellowed, glinted in the dim light. "You shouldn't be here," the old man rasped. His voice was wrong, like multiple voices speaking at once. Emily clutched Lucas's arm. "Let's go." The man's grin widened. Then he whispered, "They know you're here now." The radio screeched. The lights flickered, and the door slammed shut. Outside! Brandon cursed. The pump was old. Too old. The nozzle had no trigger lock, so he had to hold it down manually. Sophie glanced at the store. What's taking them so long? Then, movement. A shadow slipped through the trees beyond the station. A humanoid shape, tall and wrong. Brandon's pulse spiked. Did you see that? Sophie nodded slowly. Then something tapped the rear window. A pale hand. Sophie screamed. Brandon whipped around. A woman stood beside the car, her skin ashen, her limbs unnaturally thin. Her hair was stringy and wet, clinging to her face. Her mouth stretched too far, and she was grinning. Brandon yanked open the car door. Get in! Sophie scrambled inside just as the woman lunged. Her bony fingers scraped against the glass. Then, bang! The store door burst open. Lucas and Emily ran out, eyes wide with terror. Brandon slammed the gas nozzle back onto the pump, jumped in the driver's seat, and sped off. In the rearview mirror, the old man stood in the doorway, his mouth open in a silent laugh, and from the trees, dozens of them, pale, grinning figures emerged, watching them go. The road back. The car thundered down the road. No one spoke, too terrified to look back. Finally, Brandon gasped, "What the hell happened in there?" Lucas was pale. The old guy, he wasn't human. He said something, that we shouldn't be here. Emily's voice trembled, and then the doors locked. The lights went out, and her breath hitched. Hands on the windows? Sophie clutched Brandon's arm. Just get us out of here. Brandon pressed the gas. The trees blurred past, the road stretching infinitely before them. Lucas checked his phone. Still no service. Emily whimpered. This road, it's not ending. Brandon's hands tightened on the wheel. Then Sophie whispered, "We've passed that sign before." Everyone turned. A rusted, half-broken sign leaned at the edge of the road. Murphy's Gath Mile, Lucas's breath caught. No, we left that place behind. But there it was again, and beyond it, Murphy's gas station. Emily choked out a sob. Sophie shook her head. No, we left. We left. But the station was the same. The rusted pump, the flickering open sign, and standing in the doorway, the old man, grinning. Brandon screamed. He yanked the wheel. The car spun. The world flipped. The last stop. When Brandon woke, he was still in the driver's seat. The car was upside down. The windshield was cracked. The others lay unconscious. And standing outside, them, figures, lined the road. Grinning. Silent. Waiting. The old man stepped forward, his cloudy eyes gleaming. "You don't leave," he whispered. He crouched by the window, and then he grinned wider. "This road doesn't end." Brandon tried to scream, but the darkness swallowed him whole.
Story number 4.
The winding highway cut through the barren landscape like a scar, stretching endlessly into the desert night. The sky was empty, save for a cold, hollow moon that cast an eerie glow over the road. Dan adjusted his grip on the steering wheel, blinking away exhaustion. His girlfriend, Rachel, dozed in the passenger seat, her hoodie pulled up to shield her from the blasting AC. In the back seat, their friends Mike and Ashley murmured softly, their conversation barely audible over the hum of the tires on the pavement. They had been driving for hours, heading home from a weekend music festival in Arizona. The GPS had suggested a shortcut, a lonely 2-lane highway that promised to shave an hour off their trip. But now, after nearly 2 hours without passing another car, regret settled deep in Dan's chest. "We should have stuck to the main road," he muttered. Mike leaned forward. "Dude, you're just tired. Relax." Dan exhaled. "Maybe, but something feels off." Ashley glanced out the window. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction. "It's so empty. No towns, no gas stations, nothing." Rachel stirred, rubbing her eyes. "Where are we?" Dan sighed. "No clue. GPS lost signal an hour ago." Rachel sat up, glancing at the dashboard. "How's the gas?" Dan hesitated. The gauge was teetering dangerously close to empty. "We'll be fine, I think." Silence fell over them. Then something moved in the distance, a shape just beyond the reach of the headlights. Dan stiffened. "Did you see that?" Rachel frowned. "See what?" Mike leaned forward. "It looked like a person." Ashley's breath hitched. "Out here? That's impossible." But there it was again, a figure standing on the side of the road. As they got closer, its details sharpened. A tall, gaunt man wearing an old-fashioned suit, like something from the 1920s. His head was slightly tilted, and though his eyes were just shadowed hollows in the dark, Dan felt them staring. Rachel shuddered. "Don't stop." Dan nodded, gripping the wheel tighter. As they passed, the man smiled. A slow, stretching grin, too wide for his face, then he vanished. Not faded, not walked away. Just gone. Rachel gasped. Did he? Mike cursed under his breath. That's not possible. Ashley clutched his arm. I don't like this. Dan pressed the gas. The car roared forward, tires eating up the empty road. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Rachel whispered, Dan, look ahead. Look ahead. He turned his gaze forward and froze. The man was standing in the middle of the road. The same man. Rachel screamed. Dan yanked the wheel hard to the left. The car skidded wildly, tires screeching against the asphalt. The vehicle spun, then slammed to a stop. For a few seconds, everything was still. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing but empty road. Dan's chest heaved. Where? Where did he go? Rachel trembled. This isn't real. Ashley sobbed softly. We need to get out of here. Mike frantically checked his phone. Still no service. Dan put the car in drive, hands trembling. We keep moving. He pressed the gas. The road stretched on, endless and empty. And then, a gas station. A single flickering neon sign buzzed in the distance. Dan exhaled in relief. Thank God. As they pulled in, the station looked abandoned. The paint peeled from the walls and the single pump looked rusted, ancient. But the sign in the window read, Open. Dan hesitated. I don't know about this. We don't have a choice, Rachel whispered. Dan nodded. Mike, come with me. They stepped out, the air thick and silent. Inside, the gas station was dimly lit. Shelves stood half empty, stocked with expired snacks and dust-covered soda bottles. Behind the counter, an old man sat stiffly, his back unnaturally straight, eyes dull and lifeless. Dan swallowed hard. We need gas. The man didn't blink. Pumps on, he rasped, his voice like dead leaves scraping pavement. Dan nodded and turned to leave. But as he reached the door, the old man whispered, You can't leave. Dan stopped cold. What? The man smiled. You can't leave, he repeated. You've been marked. Dan's blood ran cold. Mike grabbed his arm. Let's go. As they stepped outside, the air felt wrong. Thicker, heavier. Rachel and Ashley waited in the car, their faces pale. Dan rushed to the pump, jamming the nozzle into the tank. Then he heard it. Soft, distant laughter. It echoed from the desert. Everywhere and nowhere. Rachel clutched the dashboard. Dan, hurry. Dan's hands shook as he pumped the gas. Then, the lights of the gas station cut out. Darkness swallowed everything. The laughter grew closer. Dan's breath hitched. He could see figures emerging from the desert. Dozens of them. Tall, gaunt, wearing the same outdated suits. Their smiles glowed in the dark. Mike stumbled backward. Oh my God. The figures moved closer. Rachel screamed. Dan! Dan ripped the nozzle free and dived into the driver's seat. He slammed the gas. The car tore out of the lot, tires screaming. The figures watched, and then one by one they followed, not running, gliding. Dan's heart pounded. The speedometer climbed. 60, 70, 80 miles per hour. But the figures kept up. Then the headlights flickered. The engine sputtered. Rachel sobbed. No, no, no. The radio crackled. A voice, low and static-filled, whispered, You can't leave. Then the headlights died. The car stopped. Total silence. Dan's breath shuddered. The figures stood in a circle around them, waiting. Then they smiled wider. Their mouths stretched unnaturally, their hollow eyes brimming with something ancient and hungry. The old man's voice whispered through the dark, You belong to the road now. The figures closed in. Rachel screamed. Then nothing. The car sat abandoned on the side of the road, untouched. Keys still in the ignition, doors wide open, but no sign of the 4 passengers. Just silence, and a single footprint in the dust. A perfectly polished shoe from a suit decades out of time.
Story number 5.
The moon hung low over the highway, casting an eerie glow on the empty road ahead. Dylan's fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel as the SUV hummed down the asphalt. The trip had been long, too long. He and his 3 friends, Kyle, Jess, and Ava, were heading home from a hiking trip in Colorado, but thanks to a last-minute GPS reroute, they had found themselves deep in the Wyoming wilderness, with no towns, no gas stations, just an endless stretch of road surrounded by trees that seemed to whisper in the wind. Ava sighed from the back seat. How much longer until we hit civilization? Jess, sitting beside her, checked her phone. No signal, again. Kyle yawned. We should have stayed on the main highway. Dylan clenched his jaw. Yeah, no kidding. As they rounded a bend, something flashed across the road. Ava screamed. Dylan, look out! Dylan slammed the brakes. The tires screeched. The SUV skidded to a halt just inches from a woman standing in the road. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. then the sound of their pounding hearts. Jess gasped, "Is she okay?" The woman was barefoot, wearing a tattered white dress. Her skin was pale as bone, her long black hair tangled and matted. Her face was turned away. Kyle swallowed hard. "Why is she just standing there?" Dylan hesitated. "Maybe she needs help." Ava shook her head. "No, we don't stop. Lock the doors, we drive." But then the woman moved, slowly, unnaturally. Her head twitched at an odd angle, bones cracking. Then she turned, revealing her face. Jess let out a choked sob. The woman's eyes were gone. Black, empty sockets stared back at them. Then she grinned. A slow, unnatural smile stretched across her gaunt face. Dylan's hands shook. "Nope, nope, we're leaving." He slammed the gas. The SUV roared forward, and the woman was gone. Not hit, not moved aside. Just gone. Miles later, no one spoke. The road was endless, the trees pressing in tighter. Kyle muttered, "That wasn't human." Jess sniffled, wiping at her face. I swear she was smiling at me." Ava trembled. "I want to go home." Dylan kept his eyes forward, knuckles white against the wheel. "We need to find a town or a gas station, something." Then, up ahead, a flickering neon sign. "Gas and food, open 24 hours. Relief washed over them. Dylan pulled in, parking beside the rusted old pumps. The place was ancient. Dusty windows, a single buzzing streetlight. The paint on the sign had long since peeled away. But it was open. Jess whispered, "I don't like this." Dylan shut off the engine. "Kyle, come with me." The girls stay in the car. Jess and Ava locked the doors as the guys stepped out. The air was thick, wrong. Inside, the station was eerily silent. Shelves were lined with old cans, coated in dust. A single figure stood behind the counter, an old man, his cloudy eyes locked onto them as they approached. Dylan cleared his throat. "Hey, we need gas." The old man didn't blink. Then his mouth curled into a slow smile. "You saw her. You saw her," he rasped. "Saw? Who?" The old man's grin widened. "The woman in white." Dylan's stomach turned ice cold. "How do you know that?" The old man leaned forward, voice like dry leaves. "She walks this road, has for years." Dylan glanced at Kyle, who looked just as uneasy. The old man continued, "If you see her, she sees you." Kyle scoffed nervously. "So what? It's just a ghost story, right?" The old man's smile vanished. "You don't understand." His voice dropped. "She follows you now." Dylan's breath hitched. Then the lights flickered. The radio behind the counter crackled, warping into laughter. Low, hollow, female. The old man paled. "You need to leave." Dylan didn't argue. They bolted outside and froze. The SUV's headlights were on. Ava and Jess were gone. Jess! Ava! Dylan's voice echoed into the night. The SUV's doors were open. The keys were still in the ignition. Kyle pointed. Footprints. Barefoot, prints in the dirt, leading toward the woods. Dylan's stomach twisted. No. Ava's voice suddenly whispered from the darkness. "Help." The trees loomed black and endless. Then Jess's scream. "Dylan!" They ran. Branches clawed at their skin as they pushed deeper into the woods. Then they saw her. Jess stood in a clearing, her back turned. Kyle gasped, "Jess?" She didn't move. Dylan stepped closer. "Jess?" Then her head snapped around. Snapped. Too far. Bones cracked, and her eyes were gone. Black, empty sockets stared back. Then she smiled. Dylan's breath stopped, screamed. Then the laughter echoed around them. From every direction, and in the shadows, she stood. The woman in white, watching, waiting. Her grin stretched too wide. Bolted. Dylan followed, but something grabbed his ankle. He hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from his lungs. He twisted. Jess was on top of him, her grinning face inches from his. "Stay," she whispered. Dylan screamed. Kyle's hands grabbed him, yanking him back. They ran. Branches tore at their skin. Somehow, they made it back to the gas station. Somehow, they reached the car. Kyle threw himself into the driver's seat, gunning the engine. The old man stood in the doorway, his expression blank. As they sped off, his words echoed in their heads. "She follows you now." The final night. They never found Jess or Ava. The police searched the area. Nothing. No signs of struggle, no signs of them ever existing. Dylan and Kyle barely spoke. Weeks passed. Then one night, Kyle called Dylan, his voice shaking. "She's outside my house," he whispered. Dylan's heart stopped. "Who?" Kyle sobbed. "Jess." Dylan's blood ran cold. "She's smiling at me." Then static. The call dropped. Dylan's phone buzzed. A photo message. His fingers trembled as he opened it. It was Kyle's front yard. Dark, blurry, and in the corner, a woman in white, Smiling, waiting. Dylan's screen flickered. Then a whisper in his ear, "I see you."
Story number 6.
The gas station was the last stop before the long, desolate stretch of highway. The only light came from its flickering neon sign, barely clinging to life. Ben leaned against his car, watching as his best friend, Tony, topped off the gas. Inside the store, their girlfriends, Lisa and Erica, grabbed snacks for the road. They had been driving cross-country, taking turns behind the wheel, but the last few hours had been wrong. No other cars, no streetlights, no signs of life, just the road and the dark. Lisa stepped outside with a plastic bag. "This place gives me the creeps. Can we go?" Erica followed, rubbing her arms against the cold. "Yeah, let's get out of here." Tony twisted the gas cap shut. "Full tank. Let's move." As they piled into the car, Ben glanced back at the attendant inside the station. The old man stood behind the counter, staring at them. Expressionless, unblinking. The moment their eyes met, the old man smiled. Ben shivered and quickly got in the car. They pulled onto the highway, the gas station fading into the distance. Darkness swallowed the road ahead. And then, Lisa whispered, "Wait, do you guys hear that?" Ben listened. The hum of the tires, the gentle whir of the AC, and then tap, tap, a soft, deliberate sound against the back window. Lisa turned. "What the hell was that?" Ben checked the rearview mirror. "Nothing. Just an empty road stretching for miles." Tony chuckled nervously. "Probably a tree branch or something." Ben frowned. "Out here, there aren't any trees." Then, tap, 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 tap. This time it was closer. Lisa's breath hitched. "It's coming from the trunk." Erica reached for her phone. "I'm turning on my flashlight." She pointed it toward the back seat. The beam of light caught something in the rear windshield. A face. Pale, grinning, pressed against the glass. Lisa screamed. Ben swerved the car, tires screeching on the pavement. The face was gone. Nothing outside, nothing in the trunk, just darkness. Tony gasped. "Dude, tell me you saw that." Ben's hands were shaking. "What the hell was that?" Erica choked back a sob. "That wasn't human." Lisa curled into herself, whispering, "We never should have stopped at that gas station." No one argued. They drove in silence. But the road stretched endlessly, with no sign of an exit. And then the headlights flickered. The dashboard dimmed. Ben gripped the wheel. No, not now." The engine sputtered. The car slowed. And then it stopped. Total silence. Tony exhaled. "Try it again." Ben turned the key. Click. Nothing. Erica whimpered. "Guys, we're stranded." Lisa whispered, "I don't like this. We need to..." Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from the roof. Everyone froze. Then scratch. Something dragged across the metal, slow and deliberate. Lisa covered her mouth, her breath shaking. Tony whispered, "Nobody move." Erica sobbed, "Ben, what do we do?" Ben's pulse pounded in his ears. His hands clenched around the wheel. Then, thump. Something landed on the hood. A figure. It crouched, its long, spindly fingers splayed against the windshield. Its head was tilted, dark, hollow eyes locked onto them. And then it smiled. Ben's stomach dropped. It was the same face from before. Lisa whimpered. "Oh my God," the figure tapped the glass, slow, rhythmic. Tap, tap. Erica screamed. The figure's mouth stretched too wide. Then it moved, not climbed, not jumped. It glided off the hood, vanishing into the dark. Lisa sobbed. "It's playing with us." Tony grabbed Ben's arm. "Try the car again? Now." Ben turned the key. The engine roared to life. No hesitation, no stalling, just instant power. Ben slammed the gas. The car tore down the road, tires screeching. Lisa wiped at her tears. "Is it gone?" No one answered. And then, up ahead, a gas station. The same one. The flickering neon sign. The single pump. The same old man standing inside, waiting. Lisa's voice trembled. "That's not possible," Erica sobbed. "We never left." Ben's grip tightened on the wheel. "No, we're getting out of here." He veered past the station, pushing the speedometer higher. The gas station disappeared behind them. The road stretched ahead, endless. And then Lisa whispered, "Ben, look." Ben glanced at the mirror, and his heart stopped. A figure was sitting in the back seat, between Lisa and Erica, smiling. Lisa turned, face to face with it. It grinned wider. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from inside the car now. Lisa's scream shattered the night. Then, everything went black. The next morning, the car sat abandoned on the side of the road, doors wide open, keys still in the ignition, no sign of the 4 passengers, just silence, and a single dusty footprint on the windshield, right where the face had been.
Story number 7.
The storm rolled in fast, swallowing the sky in thick, black clouds. Jake tightened his grip on the steering wheel as the rain slammed against the windshield. The wipers barely made a difference, smearing water across the glass instead of clearing it. In the passenger seat, his girlfriend Emily stared at the GPS. Damn it, we lost signal again. In the back seat, their friends Marcus and Sarah exchanged nervous glances. Marcus sighed. I told you guys taking this back road was a bad idea. Sarah shivered. I don't like this. It feels wrong. They had been driving through the Appalachian Mountains, cutting through winding roads surrounded by dense, endless forest. The highway had been shut down due to a landslide, forcing them on this unknown route, and now they were lost. Emily tapped the phone screen. If we can just find a gas station or a diner, or then through the downpour, they saw it. A figure standing in the middle of the road. Jake slammed the brakes. The car skidded, tires screeching, before stopping just inches away from the person. A man, tall, gaunt, dressed in old-fashioned clothes. His face was pale, hollowed out like something not quite human. Emily gasped. Oh my God, is he okay? Jake's hands shook. I don't know. Marcus leaned forward. What the hell is he doing out here? Then, slowly, the man lifted his head. His eyes were solid black, and his mouth curled into a slow, twisted smile. Sarah whimpered, Drive, now. Jake didn't need to be told twice. He hit the gas. The car roared forward, but the man was gone, vanished, not moved, not stepped aside, just gone. Emily twisted in her seat, scanning the darkness. Where did he go? No one answered. They just drove. The gas station. After 20 more miles of silence, they spotted a gas station. Its neon sign flickered weakly, barely clinging to life. The building was old, the kind that looked like it hadn't seen a customer in decades. Jake pulled up beside the single pump, exhaling. Let's fill up and get the hell out of here. Inside, the station was dimly lit. Dusty shelves lined the walls, stocked with ancient cans of food and fading candy wrappers. Behind the counter sat an old woman. Her skin was wrinkled and paper-thin, her eyes sunken deep into her skull. She didn't blink, didn't speak, just watched. Jake hesitated, then cleared his throat. Pumps on? The woman nodded. Once, slowly. Emily shifted uncomfortably. Okay, let's hurry. Marcus grabbed some drinks from the fridge while Sarah picked up a map. As they approached the counter, the old woman finally spoke. You saw him. Her voice was cracked, like dead leaves scraping against pavement. Jake stiffened. What? Her lips curled into a too-wide grin. You saw the man in the road. A chill crawled up Jake's spine. Marcus scoffed nervously. Lady, we don't know what you're talking about. The old woman's gaze darkened. The words hung in the air. Sarah swallowed hard. Let's go. They bolted for the door. Jake barely had time to fill up the tank before they peeled out of the lot. As they sped off, Emily glanced in the side mirror. The old woman was still watching them, still smiling. The second appearance. The storm had passed, but the unease in Jake's stomach hadn't. The road stretched endlessly, the trees pressing in closer than before. Emily kept checking the GPS. Still nothing. Marcus rubbed his temples. We have to be near a town by now. Then, Sarah whispered, Guys, the mirror. Jake glanced up at the rearview mirror, and his breath caught. There in the back seat, a reflection that didn't belong. The man from the road, sitting between Marcus and Sarah. Grinning, Sarah turned her head. There was nothing there, only in the mirror. Then, the car suddenly died. The headlights cut out, the engine stalled, total silence. Jake's heart pounded. No, no, no. Then the radio crackled. A voice whispered through the static. Low, hollow. Let me in. Sarah sobbed. Jake, start the car. Jake turned the key. The engine roared to life. The headlights flashed on, and for a brief second, they saw him, standing in front of the car. His mouth twisted in a grotesque mockery of a smile. Then, he moved. Not stepping, not walking, gliding, straight toward them. Jake floored it. The car plowed through the empty space where he stood. When they looked back, he was gone. The last stop. After what felt like hours, they saw a sign. Motel 6, 5 miles ahead. Relief flooded them. They pulled into the motel lot, the sign buzzing faintly in the dark. Inside, the air was stale, thick with mildew. The clerk barely looked up as they checked in. As Jake signed the receipt, the clerk muttered, You shouldn't have stopped. Jake froze. What? The clerk finally looked at him. His eyes were solid black. Jake's breath hitched. Then, the lights flickered. The door slammed shut on its own. The radio behind the desk crackled to life, the same whispered voice. Let me in. Jake turned, but his friends were gone. The motel was gone. The road was gone. Only darkness remained. Then a hand touched his shoulder, ice cold. Jake whipped around. The man from the road stood there, grinning. His mouth stretched impossibly wide. His hollow eyes gleamed. And in a voice not of this world, he whispered, "You belong to the road now." The next day, the motel stood empty. No sign of Jake, Emily, Marcus, or Sarah. Their car sat in the lot, doors wide open, keys still in the ignition. The only thing left behind was a single, smudged handprint on the rearview mirror. A perfect, pale handprint.
Story number 8.
The 2-lane highway stretched into endless darkness, cutting through the dense Alabama woods. Sam tightened his grip on the wheel, his knuckles white as the old sedan hummed along the cracked pavement. His best friend, Chris, sat beside him, lazily scrolling through his phone. In the back, their girlfriends, Laura and Megan, were half asleep, exhausted from the long road trip. They had been driving for hours. The GPS leading them down a desolate back road after an accident forced them off the interstate. No streetlights, no houses, no other cars. Just the trees, tall, gnarled oaks, their skeletal branches clawing at the sky. Chris yawned. "Dude, are you sure this road leads anywhere?" Sam exhaled sharply. "It's the only route the GPS gave us. We don't have a choice." Then the headlights flickered. Laura stirred. "What was that?" Sam frowned. "Damn electrical system. This car is too old for this trip." Then the radio crackled. A burst of static hissed through the speakers, cutting through the silence. Then a voice, low, hollow. "Turn around." The car lurched. The engine sputtered before roaring back to life. Megan bolted upright. "What the hell was that?" Chris shook his head, tapping his phone. "No service." Laura swallowed hard. "I don't like this. This road feels wrong." Sam forced a laugh. "It's just an old highway. We'll hit the main road soon." Then figure appeared in the headlights, a woman standing in the middle of the road. Her skin was pale as the moon, her black hair hanging in tangled knots. She wore a torn, blood-stained nightgown. Her eyes were gone, just empty sockets staring back at them. Sam slammed the brakes. The tires screeched, the car skidding to a halt just inches from her. Silence, no one breathed. Then the woman smiled. Chris choked on his breath. "Jesus Christ." Megan whimpered, "Drive, Sam, drive." Sam hit the gas. The car lunged forward, but the woman was gone. Not hit, not moved, just gone. Chris twisted in his seat. Where the hell did she go? Laura's voice was barely a whisper. "She's not gone." Megan sobbed. "What do you mean?" Laura pointed to the side mirror, and Sam's heart stopped. The woman was running alongside the car. Too fast, like her head was tilted at an unnatural angle, her mouth grinning too wide. Then she slammed her hands against the window. Megan screamed. Sam floored it, pushing the speedometer higher, but the woman just kept running. Faster. Faster. Then she disappeared. The gas station. A neon sign flickered at Gas and Food, open 24 hours. Relief flooded Sam as he pulled in beside the rusted old pumps. The gas station was ancient. Dust-covered windows, a single buzzing streetlight, and shelves lined with faded snack wrappers. An old man stood behind the counter, his eyes clouded with age. He watched them as they stepped inside. Sam cleared his throat. Can I get a full tank on pump 1? The old man didn't blink. Instead, he rasped, "You saw her." The words sent a chill down Sam's spine. Chris scoffed. "What the hell are you talking about?" The old man's lips curled into a slow, sad smile. "She walks this road, has for years." Megan whispered, "Who?" The old man's smile vanished. "She was a bride once, long ago, murdered on her wedding night. They say she still searches for her groom." Laura hugged herself. "This is a joke, right?" The old man leaned closer. "If you see her, she sees you." A silence hung in the air, thick as fog. Then the radio behind the counter crackled to life. A whisper slid through the static, low, hollow. "I see you." The old man's face went pale. "You need to leave, now." They didn't argue, they ran. The final night. The motel was the only place for miles. A faded Motel 6 sign flickered in the dark. Too tired to keep driving, they checked in, piling into a single room. Sam bolted the door, heart still racing. Let's just get some sleep and leave at dawn. No one argued, but sleep never came. At 3:12 a.m., Megan stirred. Something felt wrong. Then the floor creaked. She turned her head and froze. A shadow stood in the corner of the room. Tall, motionless, watching. Then it stepped forward. The light from the window illuminated her face. the woman from the road. Megan opened her mouth to scream, but a cold hand clamped over her lips. She vanished. Morning came. The sun bled through the curtains, casting the room in eerie orange light. Chris sat up, rubbing his eyes. Damn, what a night! Then he saw the empty bed beside him. Where's Megan? Panic shot through him. The blankets were neatly folded. Her phone sat on the nightstand, but Megan was gone. Sam bolted upright. Megan? No answer. Laura's breath shook. She wouldn't just leave. Chris checked the bathroom. Nothing. Then Sam's phone buzzed. A text from Megan. No words. Just a photo. Shaky. Blurry. Taken from a dark, empty road. And in the distance, the woman in white, standing, waiting, smiling. Sam's hands trembled. He texted back. Where are you? No response. Then his phone buzzed again. Another text. I see you. That or the final drive. They never found Megan. The police searched the area. No signs of her, no footprints. Just an abandoned motel room and a single smudged handprint on the window. A perfect, pale handprint. Chris, Laura, and Sam left town that night. They never spoke of it again. But sometimes on long, empty roads, when the night is deep and the wind whispers through the trees, Sam swears he can hear it. A soft, rhythmic sound. Tap, tap, tap. Like fingers against glass. Like a bride still searching for her groom.
Story number 9.
The road stretched into nothingness, swallowed by the night. Tom's fingers drummed against the steering wheel, his headlights carving a lonely path through the dark. His sister, Jess, sat in the passenger seat, flipping through a worn road atlas. In the back, their best friends, Mark and Lisa, were half asleep, lulled by the rhythmic hum of the tires. They had been driving for hours, cutting through the desolate back roads of Texas after missing an exit on the interstate. Jess sighed. We should have found a gas station by now. Tom glanced at the fuel gauge, almost empty. Mark groaned, shifting in his seat. Dude, just pull over and check the map. Tom exhaled sharply. There's nothing to check. There's only one road. Then, Lisa stirred. Guys, someone's up ahead. Tom squinted. A figure stood on the side of the road, barely visible in the fog. A hitchhiker. Thin. Pale. Still as a corpse. She wore a torn gray dress, her black hair matted to her face. Jess whispered, Should we stop? Mark shook his head. Hell no. Lisa frowned. She could be in trouble. But as they got closer, Tom's stomach dropped. The woman wasn't looking at them. She was looking through them. Jess sucked in a breath. Her eyes, they were solid black. Then the woman lifted her hand, not to wave, not to signal, but to point, directly at Tom. His hands tightened on the wheel. We're not stopping, Lisa protested. But what if she needs help? Then the radio crackled. A voice whispered through the static, low, hollow. Let me in. Tom hit the gas. The woman vanished into the rearview mirror, gone as if she had never been there. The gas station. 15 miles later, a gas station flickered into view. A neon sign buzzed, barely clinging to life. Tom pulled up beside the only pump, exhaling sharply. Inside, the station was eerily quiet. A single old man sat behind the counter, his milky eyes watching them. Jess grabbed a soda. Excuse me, sir, do you know the fastest way to... The old man interrupted. His voice was dry, hollow. You saw her. Lisa stiffened. What? The old man leaned forward. The hitchhiker. She chose you. Tom's pulse pounded. Who is she? The old man's lips barely moved. She walks this road, always looking. If you see her, she sees you. Silence. Then the lights flickered. The radio behind the counter crackled to life. Let me in. The old man's face twisted in fear. Leave. Now. They ran to the car. The second sighting. The road was darker now, thicker. The trees pressed in closer. Lisa clutched her arms. I feel like we're going in circles. Tom checked the mirror, and his breath caught. The hitchhiker was standing in the middle of the road. Ahead of them, again. Jess gasped. Oh my God. Tom's hands shook. That's not possible. Lisa whispered. She's getting closer. Tom's foot slammed the gas, but the car wouldn't move. The engine died. The headlights cut out. Mark choked. No, 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 no. Then tap, 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 fingers against the glass. Inside the car. Jess whimpered. She's in here. A breath of cold air slid across Tom's neck. Then the hitchhiker's voice whispered right beside his ear. Let me in. The final drive. The headlights flickered back on. The engine roared to life. Tom floored it. They tore down the highway, leaving the hitchhiker behind. But the road stretched endlessly. No exits, no towns, no escape. Mark gasped. Dude, look at the mirror. Tom's stomach dropped. The hitchhiker was sitting in the back seat, right between Mark and Lisa, smiling. Lisa screamed. Then everything went black. Ash, The next day, a state trooper pulled up to the abandoned car. The doors were wide open, the engine still running, but the four friends were gone. Only one thing remained, a handprint on the rearview mirror. A perfect, pale handprint.
Story number 10.
The GPS had to be wrong. Mike glanced at the screen, the glowing blue line leading them deeper into the woods. The road beneath the tires was barely paved anymore, just cracked asphalt with weeds pushing through. Beside him, his girlfriend Anna chewed her lip. Are you sure this leads back to the highway? In the back, their friends, Josh and Rachel, exchanged uneasy glances. Josh sighed. Man, we should have stayed on the main road. Mike exhaled sharply. The highway was blocked, remember? This was the only detour. Rachel checked her phone. No signal. Anna turned the GPS screen toward Mike. It says we'll be back on the highway in 5 miles. Mike nodded. See? We're fine. Then the headlights flickered. Josh frowned. Did anyone else feel that? Rachel shifted. Feel what? Josh hesitated. Like a drop? Like we just went over something. Mike shook his head. The road's bumpy. Anna checked the screen again. Her breath hitched. What the hell? Josh leaned forward. What? Anna's hands shook. The GPS, it says we're nowhere. Rachel frowned. What do you mean? Anna turned the screen toward them. The blue line was gone. No road, no landmarks, just blank space, like they had driven off the map itself. The first sign. The tree seemed closer, the night darker. Mike's pulse pounded. Maybe it's just a glitch. Josh swallowed hard, or maybe we're on a road that doesn't exist. Rachel shuddered. That's not funny. Anna pressed buttons on the GPS, but it wouldn't respond. Then the radio crackled. Static, a low hum sliding through the speakers. Then beneath it, a whisper. Soft. Hollow. Turn around. Anna gasped. Did you hear that? Mike's hands tightened on the wheel. It's just interference. Rachel shook her head. No, that voice. Then something darted across the road. A shape. Pale. Fast. Wrong. Mike slammed the brakes. The car skidded to a stop, tires screeching against pavement that suddenly felt too smooth. Silence. Then Anna's voice, trembling. Look. They all turned toward the road, and their blood ran cold. The pavement behind them was gone. Where the road had been just seconds ago, there was now only endless forest, like they had never driven it at all. The gas station. A single neon sign flickered up ahead. Gas and food, last stop. Mike pulled in beside the only pump, his heart hammering. The station was ancient. Dusty windows, rusted pumps, and a single attendant inside. A thin man with hollow eyes. As they stepped inside, the air was thick, heavy. The attendant watched them. Then he smiled. You took the road, didn't you? Anna stiffened. Excuse me? The man leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. It found you. Mike's stomach dropped. Josh forced a laugh. What the hell does that mean? The man's smile didn't waver. You should have never turned off the highway. The road doesn't like visitors. Rachel shivered. You're messing with us. The man's eyes darkened. Has the road disappeared yet? Silence. Then the radio behind the counter crackled to life. That same whispered voice. Turn around. The man paled. He grabbed Mike's arm. Listen to me. Don't stop. Don't look back. Drive until you see the exit. If you stop... The lights flickered. A thump echoed from outside. A hand pressed against the window. Too pale, too long, too thin. Anna screamed. The man shoved them toward the door. Go, now. The final miles. They sped down the road, the neon lights fading into darkness. Rachel sobbed. What the hell was that? Mike's knuckles were white. I don't know. Then the engine sputtered. The headlights flickered. The air grew thick, heavy, suffocating. Anna clutched her chest. I can't breathe. Josh gasped. The mirror. Mike glanced up and froze. In the rearview mirror, a figure sat in the back seat. A woman, skin gray, eyes empty, smiling. Anna turned, but there was nothing there, only in the mirror. Then the woman opened her mouth, and the radio whispered, "Let me in." The car died. The headlights cut out. Total darkness. Then a hand wrapped around Mike's throat. Ice cold. He gasped, choking. The others screamed. Then the exit. The car lurched forward. The headlights flashed back on. The engine roared to life. They burst onto a well-lit highway, city lights glowing in the distance. Mike slammed the brakes, gasping for breath. Silence. The road behind them was gone. Just an empty field. No forest, no pavement, no sign of the road they had driven. Anna sobbed. We made it. Josh checked his phone. Full service. Rachel whispered, "It's over." Mike gripped the wheel, but then his eyes flicked to the mirror, and his heart stopped. There, in the reflection, a single pale handprint, smudged against the glass like something had been sitting there all along, watching, waiting.